Hello.
Who are you?
Good evening. I need to know if you can hear me okay. We've had some problems with the sound in this room, and so if it's probably operator error because you don't know where to hold the mic. Yeah.
This is the way to do it.
Well, yeah, this is different from the one at my school. The one at my school, you have to do this. This one, apparently, you have to hold it like a rock star, so I'll do my best. I know you're eager to find out about this fellow, so I'll get on with it. My name is Martha Bristow, and I'm with UAF Summer Sessions, and I'd like to welcome you to our Discover Alaska lecture featuring Dr. Druckenmiller from the University of Alaska Museum of the North. And he's going to be sharing highlights with us about ongoing dinosaur discoveries in Alaska. But I have a few things to get out of the way first. So please take this opportunity to silence your cell phone or put it in airplane mode. Thank you. And I wanted to note that the Summer Sessions concert that's supposed to be in the Botanical Gardens tomorrow night has been moved to the Davis Concert Hall because of the smoke. And this is the Fairbanks Community Jazz Band, and they play a whole variety of stuff, and it sounds like a really, really good night, and a smoke-free evening of great music in the Davis Concert Hall. So that begins at 7 o'clock tomorrow. I guess that's all the special announcements I have. We've had more than total of 41 special evening programs this summer, sponsored by Summer Sessions, and they're all free, and it's a good way to get out and learn something new. There's a yellow legal pad in the back there. If you would like to sign up, put your email on there. We can send you a weekly note about our upcoming programs. And so back to tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Druckenmiller. He's the curator of earth science at the University of Alaska Museum of the North and assistant professor of geology in the UAF Department of Geosciences. And he is a vertebrate paleontologist whose research focuses on Mesozoic marine reptiles, particularly plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, and dinosaurs of Alaska. He has conducted field work across much of the western United States and Canada, and has active research sites across Alaska, including the southeastern Panhandle, the Alaska Peninsula, the North Slope, and several locations in between those far-flung spots. He's here to talk to grown-ups, and I noticed there are a few almost grown-ups in the audience. But I learned that he's spending his days this week in dinosaur camp. He's leading a dinosaur camp. And I want to go to dinosaur camp. This afternoon, I talked to a couple of the campers who are spending their mornings with this gentleman, and they reported that they had reassembled a human skeleton, and that was their favorite thing so far. But they've also seen a lot of fossils, and they're pretty excited. And I asked them for their review, and they said, "Dr. Pat is great." So, with that endorsement, please help me welcome Dr. Pat Druckenmiller.
Okay, thank you. If for some reason the volume does get a little out of hand, please just sort of wave your arms or go like that, and I will do my best to make sure everyone can hear, okay? Great. Well, yes, I'm happy to be here. My name's Pat, and I'm going to share with you, well, I guess what I do is my day job. I've got a pretty nice day job. I get to run around the state of Alaska and beyond, parts beyond, looking for a variety of different fossils, particularly fossil vertebrates like marine reptiles and dinosaurs, which is what I specialize in. And what I wanted to do tonight is take you on a brief tour, shouldn't be more than 3 hours, of all the various sites across Alaska that we've been doing some work. Actually, not all of the sites, but some highlights of different sites that we work. And I'll just say that there's always new sites being found. There's plenty of other places we want to go in the state of Alaska to look for dinosaurs and marine reptiles and all sorts of stuff. So I will take you on a tour to those places, both through slides. I've got some video clips from a variety of the different field sites that we work. And I've also got a bunch of props up here, which I'm going to pull out randomly here and there. And when we're done tonight, please feel free to come up and have a closer look. Some of these are real, some of these are replicas. I do have definitely some real dinosaur bones up here if you want to kind of see what those are like and pick them up and feel them, things like that. Just a tiny little toe bone there. And I just wanted to start with a little bit of a comment generally about where do you find fossils in Alaska? And the answer is everywhere. This is a map by Ray Troll of fish and t-shirt fame, but he's actually quite a paleontologist himself, and I've been able to work with Ray for a number of years. This image you see in front of you is actually not quite finished, which is why some of the things are not colored in, and others are, because this map is literally being painted as we speak. So he sent this to me last week. This is a map in the progress of being made and finalized, and we have also a version of this on display in our new dinosaur exhibit at the museum. If you haven't gone to see that yet, please stop by the museum in our temporary gallery space to see an exhibit all about Alaskan dinosaurs. So I'm not going to talk, obviously, about all of these different sites, but the point is there's a great story, a great pre-history of Alaska going on everywhere, literally under your feet. And I'm going to highlight just a few of those important sites that contain dinosaurs. So sort of cleaning it up a little bit so you can see a little more clearly, I'm going to first of all talk a little bit about marine reptiles, and I'm going to tell you in a minute also why marine reptiles are not dinosaurs. That's a story we'll come back to. Our story will start anyway in southeast Alaska. I want to tell you a little bit about also some dinosaur tracks and some of the oldest dinosaur fossils in the state from the Alaska Peninsula. We're going to talk about some field work I finished, 2 weeks ago in the Talkeetna Mountains. So this is hot off the press, literally. I'm not going to, unfortunately, talk about this tonight, but Denali National Park, which is obviously in our backyard, is a fantastic place for dinosaur tracks. This is all I'm going to say about it tonight, but I will say that later this summer we will be doing field work in Denali National Park as well. So that's a great place for dinosaurs. It's the closest dinosaur site to Fairbanks. I'm going to mention the Yukon River tracks and a new site we discovered a few years ago there, and finish up with the story of dinosaurs from the North Slope, which is really our most, well, they're all great stories, but it's probably our most complete story because we have most of the bones of dinosaurs and teeth that we find from the state of Alaska come from right up here on the North Slope, especially along the Colville River. So, first, a little tour through time. Yes, here's Ray Troll again. He's back. Ray Troll's art is really wonderful stuff. And if you don't know, you might have seen, he wrote a book along with Kirk Johnson, who's the director of the Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. They wrote a book called Cruising the Fossil Freeway. And that was a really fun book, and they're actually writing another one right now that will contain a bunch of art, including some art I'll show you in this slideshow about Alaskan dinosaurs, actually all about West Coast fossils. So look for that. I think it's going to be due. It's going to come out in about 2 years. But this is some Ray Troll art depicting geologic time. One of the neat things about Alaskan fossils, if you want to study dinosaurs and marine reptiles, you actually can see fossils from all the major time periods in what we call the Mesozoic era, which is this chunk of time right there, from about 250 million years ago to about 66 million years ago. And you've probably heard these names before: Triassic, Jurassic. I don't know, maybe you've heard of Jurassic somewhere. Cretaceous. These are the 3 big periods of the Mesozoic era. And if you want to find Alaskan dinosaurs from the Triassic, well, we don't have any. But we do have marine reptiles from southeast Alaska that I'll tell you about. We have one site and one site only for Jurassic dinosaurs in Alaska. That's the one on the Alaska Peninsula. But we have most of the dinosaur story told during the Cretaceous period. From about 90 million years ago, dinosaur tracks along the Yukon River, and from the Talkeetna Mountains, and along the Colville River in the North Slope, rocks that are there up around 70 million years ago, just like yesterday. So again, we'll be talking about all these different fossil sites which encapsulate a lot of really interesting geologic time. And I'm going to start the little story with this. And this is actually a fun story because the photo I'm showing you right here is basically the first image I saw of this fossil. I was sitting in my office in May back in 2011, and the Forest Service geologist from the Tongass National Forest down in Southeast, a guy named Jim Batchel, great guy. He's just a kid at heart. He just got all of Southeast Alaska to play in. He calls me up and says, "Pat, I'm standing down an outcrop right now. We just found this thing. It's right. We got the super low tide today, and we're looking at rocks we've never really get to look at before. And there's this bone sticking out. What is this?" So he sent me a photo, and I looked at it. Actually, it was a really awful photo on a cell phone. And we scratched our heads about it and said, well, let's see, those are Triassic rocks. So what could it be? Well, could be these things kind of related to plesiosaurs, but it doesn't look right. Could be an ichthyosaur, another group of marine reptiles. Doesn't look right. Well, the only thing I can think of is this crazy group of marine reptiles that nobody knows anything about called thalattosaurs. And he said, well, if you want to get it out of the ground, we better act quick because there's only about 4 days of the entire year that the tide is low enough to get at this site. And he said today is day number 2 of the 4 days. Okay. Well, it doesn't mean I had to be there the next day because it turned out the tide came up. It was the next tide cycle in June that we were able to go out on 2 mornings and try to excavate this fossil out of the ground. And each of those 2 days, we only had 4 hours each day to do this work. And so just to give you a little, I'll talk more about what a thalattosaur is in a second, but this is what we had. Basically, we had sort of the hip region of this animal sticking out of the rock. This is a series of part of the backbone right at the base of the tail. And yes, that's a limpet right there with the barnacle sitting on top of it. So here we are at the site. We got out there, flew out ready, knowing exactly what the low tide was going to be, which started at like 4 in the morning, of course. We got out there and we started basically rock sawing away the ground here to get down to these rocks while they were exposed for these few 4 precious hours on 2 days in a row. And on the first day, we excavated a block, which is where the tail is sticking out right here. We excavated this block. When we pulled that out, minutes before the tide came in, we noticed there was bone sticking out of that block. So we excavated the next morning a second, even larger block right there. We really didn't know what was going to be in either block, but we were happy to do that. And I've got a little clip here. I'm going to zip back and show you what field work is like in Southeast Alaska. There's no audio to this, so I will just narrate it. Clink, clink, clink. My hernia. So that's James Batchel, the guy with the big beard. He's right there operating the rock saw. Rock saw was the only way to get this stuff out of the ground. And it's very dirty and dusty work. But here he is, sawing away. He looked like a grizzled man by the time he was done, covered in dust. And we kept whittling down to it. And eventually we pulled out these blocks of rock. This is the second block of rock coming out. And there we're looking over our shoulder because the plane is literally flying in. And minutes later, this site was underwater. So those 2 days were critical in getting this specimen out. The next time the tide would be low again to get that out would have been next May, followed 11 months later. So we hopped on a plane. We flew the fossils back to Fairbanks, actually on Alaska here, not this thing. And then the next situation was we had to get it out of the rock. And there I asked a friend of mine, I hired a friend of mine who's an excellent fossil preparator to come up to Alaska and prepare the fossil during the winter months, during the nice winter months in Alaska. He flew up over the course over 3 winters, and each winter spent 2 weeks here in the middle of the winter. This is the guy, J.B. Cavagelli from Wyoming. And he spent his hours sitting just like that, cleaning up this fossil. Hours and hours of work. And there he is with a tiny little thing called an air scribe, chiseling away at the rock. It was very slow, and it was all done under a microscope. And here he is using a little sandblast And I'm just going to stop it there because we're about at the end. And what did this thing look like? Well, when we were all done, okay, there we go. When we were all done, this is what we had sticking in that rock. This skeleton right here. Now notice this is 10 centimeters. This animal is only about 3 feet long as preserved, and it's missing. It's got its head, neck, torso, front legs, hind legs. It's missing a good chunk of the tail, but we got all the good stuff. This is a world-class fossil. This is the best example of this group of reptiles known in North America. It's one of the best in the world. And in fact, we were able to confirm, yes, it is a thalattosaur. And a couple, just to orient you, this is a close-up of the skull. And to give you some scale, here's a cast of that actual skull right there. You can come up and look at it later. This is a plaster teal we made of it just recently. So it's not a big animal, that's just the head. But it's beautifully, beautifully preserved. It's even got a gut full of kind of like gut contents right there. That's kind of strange. So thalattosaurs are this group of reptiles. They're marine reptiles that only live during the Triassic period, and they're generally they're usually less than about 5 meters long, so less than, say, 20 feet long. So some of them got pretty big. This particular one wasn't very big. But they're only found in a few handful of localities in the world. And now we realize Alaska is one of those localities. So it's kind of crazy digging up really such an amazing beast right here in good old southeast Alaska. And Ray Troll did a little depiction of sort of what this marine environment might have looked like back in the Triassic. Because not only do we have, here's his rendition of what the thalattosaur looks like. Not only do we have a thalattosaur, we have different types of large marine reptiles called ichthyosaurs right here. Actually, at least 2 different species of ichthyosaurs. Crazy sharks, interesting invertebrates. There's a really great story of a marine environment from the Triassic period in southeast Alaska. And the last thing I'll say about this is one of the things we could tell when we looked in detail at this skeleton, it's absolutely unlike any other thalattosaur known. This is a new species. And we actually already were in the process of describing it. We have a name for it, but I can't share that with you yet. But I will tell you that it does reflect local Tlingit culture. So the scientific name that we will present and publish will actually have a Tlingit component to it, which is kind of neat. So it's found near the town of Cape, if you've been down to Cape before in Alaska. So that's my marine reptile story number 1. Number 2 actually finished, I said, about 2 weeks ago. I went down to the Talkeetna Mountains to follow up on a discovery of some bones that were found in the Talkeetna Mountains by a private collector. He was wandering around. He found these bones, brought them into the museum, and he said, I think these were found on state land. And so he cannot legally have those. So we gave them to the museum, which was exactly the right thing to do. I called up the state and I said, hey, we're going to go and dig this up. I submitted a permit, and 2 weeks ago we went and dug this thing up. And the animal we dug up is one of these. This is a marine reptile called a plesiosaur. And more specifically, it's a kind of long-necked plesiosaur called an elasmosaur. So if you've ever seen or you thought, maybe you've been to Loch Ness before and you saw this long neck sticking out of the water, that's kind of what they think that was supposed to be. But don't get me started on that. So we flew down to drove to the Talkeetnas, flew into the field, and this is an image of the actual site where it's found. So the collector said, yeah, I found the bones at the bottom of this bluff right here, and he actually found them over the course of 3 years. And every year he'd do a hike through there. He found more bones every year, but he couldn't find the source of the bones in the hill until last year. And he said, yeah, they're about halfway up the cliff, the 60-foot cliff. It's like, great. It's not a really convenient place, but we'll take it. So we went back and we were able to locate the spot, which was right there. And these are some of the bones. This is actually some of the vertebrae sticking out of the rock as we found them 30 feet up a 60-foot cliff. So the fun part was then excavating this little beast. We dug little steps into the hillside, shimmied up the hill, and we were able to excavate a fairly decent portion of this animal. But we weren't able to get it all. And the reason for that is this animal is again, it's this thing called an elasmosaur. This is actually the first elasmosaur ever found in the state of Alaska. It's a really amazing group of marine reptiles that are known from all over the world. And the closest find before this to Alaska was in British Columbia. So quite a long ways away. And Vancouver Island, I might add at that. So here is the portion that we found was actually only just around the shoulder girdle. The good news is it keeps going into the hill. The bad news is there's still 30 feet of rock sitting on top of it. And to get that thing out, I'm still, I don't know. We might have to take a small mountain down to do it. But so we probably will return at some point to have more of a look at this little beast and see if we can get more of it out. But I'm happy to say that we did get something. We now have on the order of about 20 vertebrae.
Elasmosaurus, what does that mean?
Elasmosaurus, so the saur part refers to the reptile. Elasmo refers to a plate. A plate. And I think that comes from the fact that the bones in the shoulder girdle are big plate-like structures. In fact, they're huge. Yeah.
Which end is in the mountain?
Oh, okay. That's sorry. Good point. Which end is in the mountain? I'm afraid to say this whole part of the animal is gone. So we do have the other half, but that's actually a really important half. Because these animals are seldomly found with their heads, in this particular species, some of these have up to 76 neck vertebrae. So this thing probably started weathering out of the ground, back during the last ice age. And because the skulls are really rare, we actually, the limbs and the shoulder girdles are really important. So if those are still in the hill, they can help us tell if this is a new species or one that's already known. So this is something we really have yet to finish up. Okay, so marine reptiles. I mentioned this is a dinosaur discovery talk. Why am I talking about marine reptiles? Well, I think it's important that to point out that any animal that lived during the age of dinosaurs wasn't just because it was old doesn't make it a dinosaur. And in fact, there's a bunch of very specific features that define what is and is not a dinosaur. And I'm just going to start out by saying that let me put it this way. All dinosaurs lived on land. There are no dinosaurs that lived in the ocean. So those critters I was just talking about, while they were swimming around on land, swimming around in the ocean, there were dinosaurs walking around on land at the same time. They were both reptiles, but the similarities end there. They have otherwise really nothing related to one another at all. So no dinosaurs lived in the ocean. So what makes a dinosaur is, first of all, it's got to be a reptile. So it's not a mammal like us. No fur, that can't be a mammal. That can't be a reptile. I've got a nice dinosaur skull right here. Dinosaurs are reptiles that have very specific kinds of openings in their skull. So, if I were to look at this skull right here, anybody want to take a guess which of those skull openings had the eyeball? So if I point right here, is it this opening, or this opening? This one here? This one? Middle one? That one? It's actually this one right here. It's the middle opening, right there. Or, a little more graphically, right there. That's where the eyeball is located. So what's up with all these other holes in the skull? Well, dinosaurs have special openings in the skull. There's an opening right where my hand is going in here, and there's one in the side. Those are important openings that all dinosaurs have. There's also another opening right here in front of the eyeball. So to be a dinosaur, you have to be a reptile, first of all, that has those specific openings in those special holes in the skull. The next thing you need to do is you actually need to have specific features that more relate to the rest of your body. Dinosaurs, at least the very first dinosaurs from which all other dinosaurs descended, have special grasping three-fingered hands. So actually, the earliest dinosaurs walked on their hind legs only, not on four legs. And they used their front arms, were asked to be very much good grasping hands. If we look at the hind legs, one interesting thing about dinosaurs, about their hind legs, is first of all, they were held under their body. They weren't sprawling out to the side like you might think a lizard or a crocodile. And they also walk up on their toes. This is your foot. And I think we all realize that when you walk with your heel flat on the ground. So here's the heel. And right here on the sort of the arch of your foot where my fingers are, these are the bones called the metatarsals. And if we compare a human foot to a dinosaur foot, like this is Velociraptor, actually a close relative of Velociraptor, we kind of see a couple of interesting things. First of all, the bones that right here across the arch of the foot are the same as these bones right there. They're way up. If I put this foot down flat, those bones do not actually rest on the ground. In other words, the heel of this animal is right here. It's right at the top. Dinosaurs do not walk flat-footed like we do. We call that plantigrade, but they walk up on their toes. It's something called digitigrade. All dinosaurs walk up on their toes, even the most massive, heaviest dinosaurs you can think of. So when we compare this to something like a close reptilian relative of dinosaurs, but not a dinosaur like a crocodile, crocodiles do not walk up on their toes, and they hold their legs out to the side in a sprawling position. So those are important features that make a dinosaur a dinosaur. So, anybody know of any other animals that have this suite of characters? Dog? Well, dogs have fur, though. Remember, those are mammals. I heard somebody say something over here. Birds. Indeedy-diety. The reason why for a while people have been sort of going, gosh, birds and dinosaurs look a lot alike. And to make a long story short, what we now recognize, based on a lot of skeletal similarities, and a lot of other things too, is that not only are birds closely related to dinosaurs, birds are dinosaurs, period.
All birds?
All birds are dinosaurs. So, now you say, wait a minute, we were taught that all dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period when the big asteroid hit the Earth and boom. Well, dinosaurs didn't go extinct. They're flying around you all over. And as the director of the museum told me the other day, he said, Pat, you're right about that bird thing. I've got a couple of geese, and they came after me the other day, and I know those damn things are dinosaurs. So yeah, birds are dinosaurs. So.
Okay, so does that mean that birds are reptiles?
Birds are reptiles. Absolutely. Yes, isn't that difficult? Isn't that birds have the special holes in their skulls. Absolutely. And here's the other thing to think about. Usually, feathers don't preserve fossils, just bones. But in some places in the world, in special sites, we're now finding skeletons of animals that are very clearly small carnivorous dinosaurs that are covered in feathers. Feathers that were obviously not useful for flying at all. Probably were useful for insulation, display. We now have a great fossil record of feathered dinosaurs. Feathers are not unique to birds. Birds simply inherited them from their dinosaur ancestors. So, and It's always good to keep in mind too. Here's a leg of a crane. It's got a scaly leg. You almost didn't know any better. You'd say that was a reptile foot, except it's got 3 big toes and 1 in the back. Birds are dinosaurs. We're buying dinosaurs warm-blooded. The available evidence says yes, although maybe not exactly like what birds are today or mammals are today. Dinosaurs almost certainly had elevated metabolic rates. We know that they grew very rapidly from small to very large size. T-Rex, for example, the oldest Tyrannosaurus rex that we have is 29 years old. It grew to full size in 29 years. You've got to be pretty warm-blooded in order to support a growth rate like that. It's crazy. Okay.
What was the difference in the you said they weren't exactly warm-blooded.
Oh, his question is that they're not exactly warm-blooded. Warm-bloodedness isn't really one thing. It's a lot of different physiological traits. And it has to do with, what your heat supply is, how fast your pulse rate is. Do you maintain a steady body temperature, or does it fluctuate a lot? And the bottom line is warm-blooded is sort of a vaguely defined term. If we think about it in our terms, probably dinosaurs may have fluctuated their body temperatures more. They may not have been as high body temperatures at times. Some people have called them mesotherms instead of homeotherms, which is what we are. So they varied in all those various little traits that define warm-bloodedness. And we're still really learning what all those are, how they varied. But yeah, great questions. Okay, well, let's talk some dinosaurs then. Now that we are on the topic, let's talk about tracks. And I'd just like to start by saying dinosaur tracks are really useful forms of information. We like bones. I mean, give me a bone. I always love bones. That's great. But most of the dinosaur sites in Alaska are based on dinosaur tracks. So we need to use this information. If we want to understand Alaskan dinosaurs, we need to know how to use tracks as tools to decipher the past. And back in 1975, actually when I started my job, there was a folder that I found in our collections that contained this photo. 1975, a photograph taken of a cliffside in southwest Alaska that was taken by some geologists who were mapping in that area looking for oil. And they took a photo like this, and clearly there was a bunch of dinosaur tracks that looked like they were walking up the side of a cliff. Of course, those rocks were originally flat, and they've been tilted up since then. But I was curious, because the little note on the back said that these may be Jurassic, but they might be Cretaceous. They weren't sure. If they were Jurassic, they'd be the oldest dinosaur fossils in Alaska. And wouldn't it be cool just to go find the site again? Well, there was no good locality information. To make a long story short, we tracked down one of the guys who actually was part of this original discovery in the 1970s, comfortably living in Hawaii. Smart man. No, I like it up here. He said, oh, yeah, he gave, like a lot of these old-time geologists I've met, he had a great memory. He remembered, oh, yeah, you want to go here. And he helped us really narrow down which valley that these fossils might be in. And so we flew to southwest Alaska, and then we chartered a helicopter pilot to come out and fly us into this valley, actually into the valley we're sitting in here, in order to investigate basically 2 or 3 likely little ravines where these fossils may have been found. And here I'll let a little video pick it up from there. So here we are flying out to our site. Sam Egley, he's kind of well-known person down in southwest Alaska. He flew us out there. And beautiful place. I was really impressed. This was my first trip to southwest Alaska, and I hope it's not my last. Just an amazing area. When flying in here, he said, the bear biologist I flew in here last week told me this has got more bears in this valley than any other place on the planet. And it was really true, because we saw bears every day. We saw bears flying in, we saw bears flying They were thick. So basically, we landed, set up camp, and then we started hiking up these, it's the morning commute up the valley to look for the fossil track site. And lo and behold, fortunately, we were able to locate one valley. We looked up the side of this cliff face, and there they were. This is the spot. Unfortunately, there was no way we were going to get there and actually work on them without using some climbing gear. So we had to set up a top rope. We shimmied our way up the side there, and we were able to get face-to-face with these tracks and actually collect some measurements. And one of the things I'm doing right there is I'm making something called a sill putty mold. It's one of these things. It's a flexible rubber compound that we can squeeze into the tracks. It dries, and then we have a perfect impression of that track. And I'm pointing out there's a log right there. We do an old-fashioned technique that works really well in this case. We trace the tracks onto a piece of clear vinyl. And it's a really handy way of collecting information very quickly. So it was a very successful trip. We came back, and I will say this, we also found, actually, some other really exciting, cool fossils while we were there. We found another kind of dinosaur that we'd never found in Alaska before while we were working there. And we're going to go back and look for more of those as well. So I'm going to leave it at that for now because it's one of those great things. You find something and then you find something else. You go, ooh, wow, that was exciting. A lot changed in those 30-some years. So here's this track site in 1975, and here's the track site in 2010 when we were there. And I'm pointing out the same two tracks right there, and right there. This entire portion of the track eroded away. And I don't know, this valley was really active. Rock slides. This site could now be gone completely. I don't really know. So I'm glad we got there when we did to record this information. So it was really significant because most Alaskan dinosaur fossils are from the Cretaceous period, between 100 million years ago and 70 million years ago. These fossils were 150 million years old, so they're pushed back the fossil record of dinosaurs in Alaska by 50 million years, which is pretty nice. And they're the only Jurassic dinosaurs in the state. And as far as who this animal was, well, this is the other neat thing. There's a lot more plant eaters in the world than meat eaters, but these are in fact meat-eating dinosaur footprints. The toes are long and narrow. And in fact, here is a cast of one of those actual footprints right there. So these are from a small carnivorous dinosaur. And our best guess of what this thing might have looked like is, well, something like this. So this is a little kind of basic rendition of your basic meat-eating dinosaur. But we wanted to know how big it was. And one of the neat things you could do is you could measure the middle toe, and in this case, multiply by 4.5, and it gives you a pretty good sense of what the hip height of that animal was in life. And so this animal had a hip height pretty close to mine, actually, a little bit taller. So there's a dinosaur called Ornitholestes that's kind of probably the closest thing to what we might have found there, but we really don't know what the species was. But we were able to confirm it was definitely Jurassic. Some of those folks hiking around with those images there included a couple of geology faculty members, Sarah Fowle, Paul McCarthy. They were along on that trip, and they really helped nail down the geology so we knew exactly how old those rocks are. And they are late Jurassic. They're really, really pretty much 150 million years old. The next big track site I want to tell you about is on the Yukon River, a site that until a few years ago was completely unknown to have dinosaurs. So, back in, since I've been here, I've worked closely with a colleague, a guy named Kevin May at the museum. He's tromped all over the state, collected a lot of dinosaurs all over the state, and we got to talking, wouldn't it be great to go look at some rocks along the Yukon River, because we knew that the rocks were the right age for dinosaurs, and they had a bunch of plant fossils, which are usually something we find with dinosaur tracks. So we said, let's take a float trip. So we started in Fairbanks, and we went down the river, down the Tanana to the Yukon, down the Yukon all the way to Caltech. That's 500 miles. So we had a nice little float trip. And along the way, we sort of sailed merrily down the river in our little dino barge, as we call it. And as we sailed down the river, basically, we would get out occasionally and we'd look for dinosaur tracks on the beach, especially in the area around Lake Galena, Nulato, and Caltech. And I believe I have another video for you. Ta-da-da. Okay, there we go. So this is us really just getting out and walking along the base of these rocks and flipping over rocks, looking for things that may be dinosaur tracks. And it was a fun little trip. So here we are, flipping over rocks, and then occasionally you flip over some of these rocks and you realize that chunk of rock has 3 toes. Here's one of them right there. This is actually one of them, one of the real tracks actually from the Yukon River. But we didn't find like 5 or 10 of them. We found thousands of them. They were all over. By the way, this is a quadcopter with the GoPro on the bottom. You fly it up, spin it around, take some great images. We actually even used it for prospecting on cliff sides we didn't want to hike up to. And it was really quite a nice little float trip. So these are the beaches we walked. The whole secret to finding stuff is low water. You can see there's a beautiful dinosaur track right there on the side of that block of rock. A big 3-toed dinosaur track. For the really large chunks of rocks we don't want to carry, we have to saw to make them a little more manageable in size. And it was pretty buggy. It's interior Alaska, what do you expect? So this is how we spend our time, tromping around. So you can see Megan here, undergraduate in our lab. She had a beautiful 3-toed track. And I'll tell you what some of these guys are in just a second. These are all dinosaur footprints. Boom, 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 boom. We collected all of those dinosaur footprints in 15 minutes on one beach. 15 minutes. Then we wrap them up, bake them at 450 for about 3 hours, and they soften up beautifully with garlic, salt, pepper. All right. Okay, there we go. So, this is a really typical kind of outcrop along the Yukon River. And did you see the track? See the dinosaur track? See that thing right there? That is a dinosaur footprint. I think you can all see that's probably a pretty darn nice dinosaur footprint. This is actually the cell putty peel that was made on that very footprint right here. The question we kept asking ourselves, why did nobody see these things before? Well, probably because if you notice, they're kind of a strange sort of track. The ones on the Alaska Peninsula were indentations into the rock. That's kind of what you think of, right? When you think of a footprint. If you notice, these are sticking out of the rock. How the heck do you do that? Well,
Did they determine what elevation those rocks are coming from on the rock?
they're coming, his question is, what elevation are those tracks coming from? They're actually coming from throughout that entire layer. In fact, that layer of rocks is several thousand feet thick when you put all of them together.
What's the year difference between the top and the bottom?
We're not exactly, he's wondering how old the rocks are, how many millions of years difference between top and bottom. We don't know the answer to that question yet. These rocks have not even been given a formal formation name.
You have a rough idea?
We have a rough idea from some work that has been done. Seems as though they probably vary, they're possibly as old as 90 to even 100 million years old, and to as young as 80 million. So there's probably at least 10 million years of rocks piled up in this area. So here's the golden question again. Why did people not see these? Well, probably because, again, when you make a normal dinosaur track, if you will, you think of an impression into the ground. And that's what we call the true track. But if that true track fills with sediment, especially if it fills with a different kind of sediment than what the track was made in, like something like sand, which becomes sandstone and is very hard and resistant. Millions of years later, when this erodes out of the cliff, you end up with a footprint, a cast of the true track. So that's called a natural cast, and the other kind of footprint is called a true track. Almost all of the tracks we found on the Yukon River were natural casts. And so I don't think most people had this sort of search image in their head when they might have walked along a beach. Even if they saw something, it might not have made sense, which is totally understandable. Here are some examples of the kinds of animals that made these tracks. A large plant-eating dinosaur, probably closely related to Iguanodon, if you're familiar with that left footprints from both its hind foot, which are large three-toed tracks with short stubby toes. And you might notice they also walked partly on their front feet, and they also left small toed tracks from the front legs as well. This is kind of interesting. This group of dinosaurs are called ankylosaurs. They're the tanks of the dinosaur era. They were covered in these bony plates. Ankylosaurs have different numbers of toes in their front and hind feet, and we are actually finding impressions from both the front and the hind legs of ankylosaurs. We found meat-eating dinosaurs, fairly large ones like this, also smaller ones. We found one particular kind of meat-eating dinosaur that's all over this track right here, these tracks. Want to guess what they are? Now that you're all experts on this, these are birds. We have 90-million-year-old bird tracks from along the Yukon River. So these little footprints right here, some of them are better preserved than others. Those are little thin toes left from a bird 90 million years ago, maybe one that flew all the way up here. A lot of these mostly resemble probably some kind of a wading bird. I'm not saying they were not great blue herons that made these tracks, but some kind of large wading bird probably. We have some very odd tracks that we're still studying. This is one that we thought looked like a meat-eating dinosaur track, except there was one problem. Meat-eating dinosaur tracks have 3 toes. This one had 1, 2, 3, 4. They look an awful lot like some tracks found in Denali National Park and Preserve. 1, 2, 3, 4. And these have been interpreted as belonging to one of the most bizarre dinosaurs you can ever imagine, the Edward Scissorhands of the dinosaur world, and a group of dinosaurs called Therizinosaurs. They're famous because this is a claw from the hand of a Therizinosaur. That's one hand claw from one of these crazy dinosaurs. And to make it even more crazy, we think they're plant eaters. Their teeth do not look like typical meat-eating dinosaurs. So they may have been running around. And we saw some tracks both in place in the cliff that were big and round, and some that had also weathered out. And those are the hind and the foreprint as we interpret from this group of dinosaurs, sauropods, like Brontosaurus. This is the first definitive evidence for this group of dinosaurs in Alaska. Running around in central Alaska, 90 million years ago, roaming around through forests. Kind of crazy. Okay. And I'm going to finish up with a little tour on the North Slope, which again, as I mentioned, is one of our big hotbeds of activity. We'll be heading out to the North Slope again here in just a couple of weeks for a few more, another field season of work. And this is the Colville River. The Colville River is the biggest drainage on the North Slope, and it cuts down through these rocks. These are called the Prince Creek Formation. Those rocks are about 70 million years old, and they have the best dinosaur record in Alaska because they have a lot of bones and teeth and tracks. One of the amazing things about this site on the North Slope, and this is true for all Cretaceous dinosaurs in Alaska, is that we need to put ourselves in context. Here's a map of North America 70 million years ago when these dinosaurs were walking around. So this is the United States, here's Canada, all up into here, and there is Alaska. Alaska was just taking shape. It was still growing, literally, at the time. And what was really crazy that we know about North America in general is that Alaska was farther north than it is today. So not only were there dinosaurs running around in Alaska 7 million years ago, they were running around on real estate that was farther north than it is today. In fact, as far as we know, it was the northernmost real estate on the planet during the entire age of dinosaurs. And there were dinosaurs running around all over the place up there, as high as 85 degrees north, almost the North Pole. North America has since actually rotated so that what's now the area we call Alaska is actually rotated mostly south. So we're not as far north, but we're obviously still up there.
Where was the southwest Jurassic location at that time? Because it doesn't show up on the map.
So his question is, where was the southwest Alaska Jurassic locality? That's a good question. The answer is we don't really know, because the rocks that make up the Alaskan Peninsula were still being glued to the southern margin of Alaska and being faulted and transformed up along the southern coast. And literally, those rocks during the Jurassic may have been even somewhere down here at the time. So those rocks and those dinosaur tracks may have been made before they were anywhere near Alaska. Yeah. It's a good question. Another amazing thing about Alaska at that time, it was farther north, but the entire Mesozoic period was a lot warmer than it is today. How warm? Well, we use plants to tell us about that, and I won't get into all the details of how we do that, but today, anybody know what's the average yearly temperature for Fairbanks, Alaska? So in other words, if you took average temperature of every day and averaged those across the year, what's our average yearly temperature in Fairbanks? 25, 40, go here 50 going once. Well, imagine, first of all, we have permafrost, so probably the average annual temperature is going to be below freezing. And in fact, it's about 27 degrees in Fairbanks, and that's changing, of course. What is it in Barrow today? Well, sorry, what's it in Juneau today? About 41 degrees, pretty balmy. Barrow, Alaska, which is the same latitude basically where we dig up these dinosaur bones, 10 degrees, pretty chilly. Based on plant fossils, what's our estimate for the average yearly temperature 100 million years ago on the North Slope? 50 to 54 degrees. And it cooled a little bit by the very end of the Cretaceous, but it was still probably at least about like Juneau temperatures on the North Slope 70 million years ago. So this was a great place for dinosaurs to live. It was cool, but it wasn't really cold. It probably snowed, but the big problem any dinosaur living up there had to face was darkness. More so even than today, because it was farther north. So they had prolonged dark winter periods that were not nearly as cold as they are today. So it's a very strange environment. And on top of that, there are plant fossils indicating not just plants, but tree trunks growing in the same rocks, or found in the same rocks as these dinosaurs. There were forests growing at the polar latitudes during the age of dinosaurs. So here's two words you don't put together today: polar forests. That's exactly what we had back in Alaska 70 million years ago. So this is Ray Troll's take on the polar forests of Alaska, with a variety of critters running through there. Crazy idea, but Ray actually came up to the North Slope with us and was doodling every day and making these new bits of art for his book. It was kind of fun.
Some of them go on dark. Did they kind of hibernate? Did they migrate? Did they bump into each other?
So yeah, so the question is, what did they do during the winter? Did they migrate, hibernate, bump into each other? I'm going to come back to that in a bit, so don't forget that. But let's look at the cast of characters. Let's see who's there first. We dig out bones from a number of different bone beds, and these are some of those dinosaur bones. And here's a quick taste of life doing field work on the North Slope. So we get around again with those same zodiacs. We fly them in, blow them up, and then, I should say, inflate them. We don't blow them up. We inflate them, and that's how we get along, is on the Colville River there. Some of the sites here also were right halfway up the side of a cliff, so we actually have to rappel down. We actually rappelled down to find some of the sites, and then we have to use ropes to knock down some of the rocks on top of us so they don't come on top of us, but they simply come down under control. This is one of our sites we worked last year. Every little blob of foil here has a bone under it. So this is a bone bed full of all sorts of different dinosaurs. Some really cool new things that are coming out of this site. And we're going to go back to the site again this year. I just got some photos from the BLM a week ago of what happened to the Colville River this summer, or this last winter when it broke up. Actually, it was June when it broke up. It totally reconfigured the cliffs down there. It really took a bite out of the cliffs. It's going to be interesting to see what's left of this site when we return this year. So we excavate, here we are, this is the typical thing. Ice picks, nothing high tech about it. Ice picks, shovels, a lot of sweat, or not always so sweaty, it's pretty cold sometimes. Beautiful dinosaur tracks that we find up in this area as well. From all sorts of different kinds of meat-eating dinosaurs, plant-eating dinosaurs, birds. There's some small meat-eating dinosaur tracks right there, really beautiful ones. And this, again, is how we make those peels using silk putty of those tracks. This is actually a trackway from a bird, a very large wading bird. Okay. Yeah, you got to catch your dinner, too.
You know, with all our rappelling and belaying and all that, you all fall off the cliff.
Do we fall off? No, we don't fall off, fortunately. We go to great lengths to make sure we're pretty safe when we're up there. We use, we're always using helmets in the quarries, for example. That being said, the worry isn't falling off the cliffs. The worry is the cliffs falling on you. Because those cliffs are basically really, really soft rock that's held together mostly by permafrost. And on warm days, it's a bad combination. It starts melting that ice, and you start to hear the cliffs slough off. So
I've got another question. Do you ever use water to hydraulic the bones from or tracks from the soft material?
Oh, his question is, do we basically try to hydraulic the bones out of the cliffs with water? No, we've never really done that. You could. I think the BLM we'd have to spend a little time getting some permits for that, but with the BLM, we'd have some special permitting requirements, I think, for that. But no, we haven't done that. And most of the time, the excavations we need to do, we can mostly do with how far we can dig in with. If we get into permafrost, we use jackhammers.
You get it permafrost what?
When we get into permafrost, we use jackhammers to get the rock, to get the bones out. Yeah. So it's pretty typical. If you see the bones, there's actually a big leg bone right there, sticking out of the hill. There's another bone right there. There's another bone right there. So it takes a little bit of an eye, but there are bones galore. There's a bone, there's a bone, there's a bone, there's a bone. There's bones all over the place in certain layers. And the most common dinosaur is this. It's a duck-billed dinosaur. And this is actually a skull of one of these duck-billed dinosaurs that we just was finished. Most of the duck-billed dinosaur remains are found from juveniles. In fact, pretty young animals, like less than 10 feet long. That's still pretty big, mind you, but these adults got to be close to 30 feet long. So we find a lot of juveniles. And we've been studying these bones for a long time because we have a lot of them. And one of the big questions was, here's a reconstruction of that sort of juvenile skull. Is this dinosaur the same thing as a very similar dinosaur that we know from the lower 48 in Canada called Edmontosaurus? You can obviously see where that name came from. It's from Canada. Is this Edmontosaurus? And I'm happy to say, after spending a lot of time studying this material, I have a PhD student who recently graduated working on this. We're pretty happy to say that, confidently say that this is in fact a new species of Alaskan dinosaur. And this paper was just recently accepted, so we'll be announcing this a little more publicly very soon. So stay tuned for more information on that beast. So a new Alaskan duck-billed dinosaur. This is is a reconstruction of what that animal might have looked like. This is a painting by James Havens, an artist from Anchorage, Alaska, and he did an excellent job. This painting is 11 by 16 feet, and it's on display in the museum. So please come to the museum, and when you walk in the front doors, you can't miss it because it's right across from the front desk. It's the only place we had to put it. It's pretty big. It's amazing. You did a great job. Large plant-eating dinosaurs. The vegetation is all very accurate as well.
Didn't some of the old pictures used to have palm trees in them?
Some pictures had palm trees in them, but we did not have palms up there at that time. Palm trees are actually required even in warmer weather. Palm trees cannot grow anywhere where the soil ever freezes. So that's the distinguishing thing. We know it was definitely freezing temperatures at times when these dinosaurs were alive. Here's an ugly chunk of rock that is actually part of the skull of a whole other new group of dinosaurs we did not know we had in Alaska. Lambeosaurs. Lambeosaurs are duck-billed dinosaurs with these big, crazy crests on top of their head. And Ray Troll took a stab at what he thought this lambeosaur might look like. Truthfully, we don't actually know what the crest was. We have a good portion of the skull, but we don't have the crest. But we know it was a lambeosaur. So that's also a new type of dinosaur new to the state of Alaska. He depicted a few of the other rare dinosaurs we have there, such as ornithomimosaurs. These are meat-eating dinosaurs that do not have teeth. And a couple of small plant eaters, Ordromius and Parksosaurus. I won't spend a lot of time on those. If there was a dinosaur that hibernated, it was probably one of these guys. And then meat-eating dinosaurs. Most of the meat-eating dinosaur remains are based on teeth. The bones are pretty rare. We do have some. And here's sort of an example of the size range of teeth. And just to give you an example of that, I've got some of them here with me. I'll put one of these up right here on the little projector screen. So I'll switch it over here real quick. That is a real tooth of a little meat-eating dinosaur called Troodon. So there's my finger for scale. And this is actually large for Troodon. We think this is also probably something new. I can zoom in a little bit better. There we go. Very distinctive little tooth. It's got these little serrations along both the front and the back edges. So that's one kind of meat-eating dinosaur. Here's a larger relative, one called Dromaeosaurus. Right now, Velociraptor is very popular because of some particular movie out there you might have heard of. There we go. It's kind of cool to know that we had basically an Alaskan Velociraptor right here from the North Slope, and that's one of its teeth right there. So they're all pretty small. And yes, Velociraptor is not this tall. This is actually what actual size Velociraptors are. Darn that Spielberg.
Do we know if he actually killed things or scavenged?
Oh, well, I think a lot of these meat eaters probably both killed and scavenged. They were smart. I think like many living meat-eating animals, they did both. Whatever was convenient. I just want to show you, then for comparison, the largest dinosaur tooth we have from Alaska comes from a close relative of Tyrannosaurus rex. And this was recently named Nanuqsaurus. But that's the size of that tooth. And that's the top of the tooth of this animal. For comparison, that's T-Rex. So T-Rex is a bit bigger. T-Rex is pretty frightening, actually. Okay, let's go back to that. All right. So that's this new animal named Nanuqsaurus, recently named. It's mostly known from just literally a handful of bones. So there's a lot we have yet to learn about this dinosaur. And I'll just finish up by pointing out some other really cool little things we find in the form of teeth. And these are really little teeth. That's 1 millimeter scale bar right there. little more realistic, here's a dime, and here's a whole bunch of teeth of this animal, and we think, short us, but we seem very likely that this is probably from a bird. There were definitely birds up there. We have tracks of them, and the birds at the time, they had teeth too. So imagine that swarm. Imagine a goose with teeth. That's kind of scary. Okay, well, I'm going to just wrap it up there and just say, please come and visit our museum, see our new exhibit in the temporary gallery hall, see the artwork by James Havens that's hanging up on the wall by the front desk. And I'll shut up because I've definitely talked enough and take a few questions from you. Okay, yes, so going back to her question about the dark. So what do these dinosaurs do in the winter? You know, we're still figuring that out. We take bones and we slice them up and we try to understand how fast dinosaurs in the polar region were growing. And what we're finding is that bones of dinosaurs that lived way up north in those really dark conditions tend to lay down these little layers that allow us to tell how old they are. They're annual growth layers. They're probably produced by that really strong change in photoperiod from light to dark every year. We do not see those features in very close relatives in the lower 48 in Canada, which suggests to us these dinosaurs were probably not migrating. There's actually several other lines of evidence to suggest that dinosaurs up there probably did not migrate. They stayed put in the winter. And again, the problem wasn't the cold, it was the dark. But going back to the warm-blooded question, if dinosaurs were not totally as warm-blooded as modern mammals, that may have been an advantage in these environments, because they could actually lower their metabolic rate and endure long, awful conditions without requiring as much food. And when you think today about how many herbivores survive in interior Alaska, namely things like moose, caribou, other things, it's pretty impressive what they can put up with. As long as they have food, they can survive. Yeah, question over here.
I like to watch in National Geographic, and there's this T-Rex skull, and there's a paleontologist, it was about different the same dinosaur and different growth. I like his biggest T-Rex that I like the skull that he ever found was when he was about to be 50 feet long.
So 50 feet, yeah. That's pretty big for T-Rex. Yeah, T-Rex is still one of the most massive meat-eating dinosaurs, even if Spinosaurus, which has been famous from Jurassic Park 2, is probably a little longer, but not quite as scary. Question there.
Yeah, in all the pictures, and you said they're walking on their hind legs, even with their tail, it looks like they're off balance, they have to do a lot of muscle strength, all that heavy weight.
So her question is basically, how did these dinosaurs walk? They look off balance, she said, because they're sort of bent over. And that's
so heavy in the front, even though their tails are long.
yeah, so one of the things we can actually do is calculate, and I have a colleague who does this, you can calculate center of mass using computer modeling. And yeah, that's definitely an issue. Fortunately, it does all balance out. And actually, they do have a center of mass that makes perfectly good sense for being a bipedal animal, walking on hind limbs without falling out. And that tail was a huge counteracting, a huge counterweight for that. Yeah. Over here.
Does Ray Troll assign your colors, or are you?
Does Ray Troll assign our colors for a dinosaur? In this case, yes. He was being creative. Of course, his colors are rather bold and making a statement. So yeah, that's partly for fun.
Did any of the dinosaurs up here have feathers?
Oh, did any dinosaurs up here have feathers? Almost certainly all of the meat-eating dinosaurs had feathers that were found in northern Alaska. But we have never, ever found direct evidence for those feathers. We know that all of their close relatives had feathers from a few other rare sites. So we're sure they had them, but we just haven't found direct evidence here. Right now, as best we understand, feathers only appeared in meat-eating dinosaurs. Only in the lineage of meat-eating dinosaurs. That story might be changing based on some new discoveries that suggest there might have also been feathers in some of the plant eaters. This is just emerging information that we're beginning to learn about. Yeah, sorry, over here.
What was the mechanism of the warmth in that area? It was 70 degrees north, you have 6 months of dark at 70 degrees, so it was warm for what, under what mechanism? Was it atmosphere?
So why was it warm up there even though it was kind of still chilly? What was the mechanism of warmth? I mean, the same reason as today. Through atmospheric warmth, one of the big things that made a difference for these animals, and this doesn't always figure into those average manual temperature measurements, is those dinosaurs were living right next to the Arctic Ocean. But the Arctic Ocean during that time, as best we understand, never froze. So they were, by staying close to the ocean at high latitudes, the ocean was a heat sink and was probably keeping, locally at least, along the coast, it was keeping it relatively warm and was probably a big advantage to those animals living there. Did that answer the question?
But why did the ocean freeze? Why is it that mean temperature that high, that north? Orbit
okay. So you're saying, like, in a big picture, why was it so much warmer, really, during that time in general? Elevated CO2, there's a much greater, much higher level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere during this time. And that is probably also a result of increased volcanism and sea spreading rate. The continents were literally moving faster during the age of dinosaurs, and that was liberating a lot more carbon dioxide. So that was part of it. Question?
There's a suggestion that the tilt of the axis here is not occurred to actually the Mississippi, which might affect the time
Okay.
onset of the
So the change in the tilt. So I've not heard that before. Like, I guess conventional wisdom, and it could certainly be wrong, is that the tip of the tilt of the Earth, just as it does today, wobbles slightly, producing the seasonality, but was not hugely out of whack in the Mesozoic. I guess I've not heard that before. I should look into that. I'm not familiar with that. I'll take one more question, and then I'm happy to. I know it's getting kind of late, so I'll take one more question, and then please feel free to come up and ask more. Yeah, right here. Are there any bones in Valdez? No, there aren't, that we know of. Not in dinosaurs anyway. So most of the rocks down there are too young. They're not old enough, and a lot of the rocks come from the seafloor. So they're rocks that have recently been pushed up because there's obviously a lot of plate tectonics going on in that area. Anyway, I'd love to. Oh, let's have Carl in the back, right?
Was that preceding the dates that we were dealing with here? The issue of star, for example, early Creek. How does that fit in time-wise with the Druckenmiller dinosaurs?
Yeah, so the question is, some of the marine reptiles, most of the marine reptiles we talked about tonight, at least first one was from the Triassic period. And we also have, even from the Brooks Range, Triassic marine reptiles, including a big ichthyosaur that Carl was a part of discovering way back in the 50s. And so those Triassic marine reptiles, millions of years before these dinosaurs. So the first dinosaurs showed up right at about the same time that ichthyosaur was found in the Brooks Range from those Triassic rocks. So the oldest dinosaurs are also from the Triassic, but only from the very last part of the Triassic. But it was when those ichthyosaurs and phalangosaurs were alive. So really, there's a huge amount of time in the Mesozoic when there were dinosaurs and there were marine reptiles. But at the very beginning of the Mesozoic, there were no dinosaurs at the very beginning. Okay, well, I'll finish up there. Thank you for coming.
Dr. Daniel talk about the Colville River. Your trip the last decade was discovered. Were there in the late 1800s where there was just not enough people? There were natural history people, but they weren't geologists.
There were definitely geologists that started to move up to here in the very latest 1800s, and they were finding plant fossils, but they weren't finding bones. And it wasn't until 1961 that one geologist on the Colville River actually found the bones. And then it was like a surprise because, you know, why would there be dinosaurs in the Arctic? That's just, that people didn't even, it wasn't even on their radar. They weren't even thinking to look for them. And there weren't really any paleontologists specifically looking for them.
So geologists may have seen things, but not known what they were saying.
Exactly. Exactly, yeah.
So have you and others been more funded in the last decade?
Oh, you got a fun job.
It's a struggle all the time. It's not like it's gotten any easier.
Somehow you've been able to do that.
I spend a lot of my time doing it. Yeah, it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. It takes, I mean, every little trip into the Colville River is $25,000. That trip to Southwest Alaska for 4 days was $35,000. Mostly helicopter time. Yeah. Oh, gosh.
What bone did you use, or could you use any bone to be able to determine the
plastic.
moisture?
Yeah, it's plastic.
Like the growth rings?
Yeah, the growth rings. Any?
We use, no, not any bones. You need to use some kind of a limb bone. And it's some limb bones, you know, when bones grow and, you know, if an animal starts out that big, it might be laying down growth rings, but it gets bigger, and so it remodels all of the older bone away, and you lose that. You lose all that history from the natural remodeling. But you have to find a long bone that doesn't grow a lot and has areas of bone that aren't remodeled to grow. That's the hard part. So it's not just any long bone, and we often don't know until we cut them up. You just have to look.
I was up at Top 2 many years ago, 1970, and we were finding the fish up there. We were taking fish's head, cut out a little bone.
Is that the thing?
Just the rings.
Those are great, yeah. I wish we had something that easy for dinosaurs. That would be Okay. All right, good to see you, Matthew. Yeah.
What's in here?
I don't know.
Hey.
Let's not touch those.
This is that's real.
That's the dinosaur time.
All right. Should we go? I think you saw it all.
Oh, yeah, also was different stages.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure she's got some reasons, or was it such an explosion of life on this planet in this time situation? Such different species.
I think there was just as much, many different species of dinosaurs as there are like mammals running around today. They were really diverse, and they were constantly changing through time. And so we can even study how different species change through time in certain places where we have a really good fossil record. And, you know, types of horned dinosaurs, for example, that changed from one species to another to another. So, yeah, there was a lot of them, but there was a lot of different kinds as well.
And I guess what I never understand, what I never can explain him, is why survived the shark in the ocean and all the other stuff. And the shark was the same as the dinosaurs. Is there some...
Well, like, so why sharks have been around for so long?
Why they're still around?
Sharks changed a lot in their history as well. The oldest sharks are like 400 million years old, and there were extinctions in different groups of sharks as well. The modern sharks you see today actually showed up at the same time as the dinosaurs. And yeah, it's true, they did. They managed to survive and through that Mesozoic when all the dinosaurs, well, except birds, when they died out, they still are thriving today. They were very successful. They're good at what they do. And yeah, it's a very successful body plan. And they're amazing hunting machines. All the different sensory organs they have.
Lifespan. I assume it varies between the species.
the lifespan of these dinosaurs. Like I say, we're figuring that out as we go for many things right now. We need those growth rings in the bones, which we don't always find. We often don't. And right now, our guess is that duck-billed dinosaur, that young animal right there, probably belonged to an animal about 3 years old. And the adults are probably adult size by the time. This is still, we're figuring this out, probably around like 12 or 15 years old. 30 feet long. Yeah, so pretty fast growing.
What are your ideas on the extinction?
You know, I think a big meteorite had a lot to do with it. But it was maybe more of there were probably several bad things that all happened, came together and happened at once. Because it doesn't really seem like dinosaurs were on their way out otherwise.
I saw a movie on the end of the Permian.
Yeah.
And they don't say one thing, they say three things. You know, and in conjunction with each other.
Right, yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially in the Permian, it was a lot of volcanism that was going on. It's a big part of that. Yeah.
If I brought you a tooth, about the size of that one you almost touched there, this one right here.
Yeah, this guy?
Identify?
Sure, I do my best. Is it like mammal or reptile?
No, that was a dinosaur.
Oh, sure, yeah. Be happy to look at it.
Sure. It was sold to me as a Spirosaurus. However, I found that Spirosaurus have smooth conical teeth. And this is because the one edge of it is serrated.
Yeah. Well, I could look at it. I'd be happy to look. Yeah, sure.
I just wondered if that was possible.
Sure, absolutely. On the museum website, it's easy to find my name, Earth Science Curator. You can call and we can set up a time, which is the easiest way.
I know a bunch of boys that
Yeah, do you want to hold that? That's a real theropod tooth right there, real meat-eating dinosaur. This is a replica of T-Rex, but yeah. So this part is just that part right there. And this is all the root of the tooth. Yeah, your teeth are roots.
What's the root? Where does the root begin?
It begins right about everything from there down is the root.
Down is
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw him yesterday. Because they had
Yeah, what's your question?
We're still
Like the great shark has survived for 10 million years.
Can you say that again?
Great shark has survived for 10 million years.
Has it been that long? That could be.
Said in National Geographic.
Okay.
Dinosaurs that.
Oh, this one right here. This one's Tarbosaurus, but some people call Tarbosaurus Tyrannosaurus too. Tyrannosaurus rex lived in North America. This lived in Asia, but we know that they were connected, and some people think this is just another species of Tyrannosaurus. Yeah. It's really very, very similar. Very similar. Feel free to, yeah, if you want to take a picture too, you can have nightmares.
when John Wanda ran into Malaysia and the mountains rose up. What age were we talking about there? Was the dinosaurs in there?
No, that was before. They collided and made that supercontinent in the Permian. And then, in the Permian, and then it was in the Triassic, right about the time dinosaurs started, that those continents started to break up.
I see, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, in other words, they wouldn't be able to walk from Shanghai to San Francisco then.
Not at that point, but what changed and happened much later was that right here in Alaska, there was an intermittent connection between North America and Asia, but that happened much later. And when that happened, a lot of the dinosaurs in North America are very similar to ones in Asia. It's the only place in the world, like the duck-billed dinosaurs are very closely related to the North American ones. The ones in Asia are very closely related. The ones the meat-eating dinosaurs. They're very similar as well.
I sure enjoyed your talk.
Yeah, well,
I'm
thanks for
awfully glad I came.
thanks for coming.
Where do we sign up for getting our name on the?
Yeah, I think she can help you with that. Oh, thanks. Sure.
This is all kind of biologists.
Oh, yeah.
What is like a basic reference? Are there like basic articles, basic chapters, someplace just to get boned up on Alaskan? Or is it all scientific?
On Alaskan dinosaurs?
Yeah.
You know, my predecessor, a guy named Roland Gangloff, he wrote a book called Dinosaurs Under the Aurora. And frankly, a lot's changed even since that book came out. But it's a good background on the history of discovery, not just in Alaska, but other places. But it does focus on Alaska. And so that'll get you up to speed. What we've done since his time is we've tried to really figure out what all these different species of dinosaurs were, and a lot of those assignments have changed. Yeah, and mostly in that they're a lot more specific now.
Because some of these things are really
It'll give
fragile.
you a good general idea of what's going
They're
on.
millions and millions of years old after all. Yeah, that's approved. So if you're not careful, sometimes things fall apart.
Oh,
But if you make
that's
a
more in the
replica
technical
out of it,
literature.
you make a mold, fill it with plastic type thing,
Oh boy,
then you have something like this
they're
that
in
you
a
can
lot of different journals.
chuck around a little bit and still
Trying
have
to
it be
think of what-
faithful to all the little cracks.
So
Or is there a lab that's doing most of the work?
there's a bunch of labs. So one of the guys I work with on the North Slope is one of the main guys who's worked on aging dinosaurs and figuring out like how old T-Rexes and stuff. His name's Greg Erickson. And if you
So was that
he is
CK?
part CK, yeah. So he's written a lot of papers about things relating to dinosaur physiology and growth.
Okay.
And and those are all like sexy papers, so they're on like
You know
Science and
that
Nature.
white
Okay.
building
But then
right
there's
over,
But there's
references
still-
right in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
right over there.
Thank you.
Have a good
Tree
one.
rings, yeah.
In the fossilized trees in the Colville.
Oh, they're really nice. They have a lot of late wood in them, and they show a lot of variation. So it looks like the tree rings suggest that, as they were growing, there would be cold periods in the middle of warm periods that would cause them to lay down almost winter-like size cells, and then they would be able to pick up again growth. So it showed that the climate was fluctuating a lot. Even during warm seasons, there could be cold spells. I've not, that's not something I specifically study. I know there are a couple papers that have been written about inferences made on the tree rings. I would think there'd be more, but I don't know. Is there something specific more?
I just wondered what they looked like, whether it was highly seasonal, obviously highly
Yeah,
seasonal.
really, really nice rings. I mean, very definitely highly seasonal. And we
so
put
the
some.
same kind of trees farther south. In other words, these weren't trees like we have today. They're fern trees or something.
No, well, they were pretty different. So here's the other interesting thing is flowering plants and, broadleaf trees first showed up about 100 million years ago in the middle of the Cretaceous period. And some of the rocks on the North Slope have the rocks from that age, and we've got in fact, the ones on the Yukon River have beautiful, big, broad leaves. Some of them are this big. By the time, like on the Colville River, it's slightly later, those have been better identified. And the large trees are almost entirely conifers. They're deciduous conifers, so they lose their needles every year. And the common one is called metasequoia, and metasequoia is still around today. It's a different species, but it's still metasequoia. And they're the kind of funny trees. They show them off in botanical gardens, but they are a deciduous coniferous tree, and we definitely have needles and wood from those on the North Slope. Basically, the bottom line is all the trees that were this size down to this size were conifers. All the trees that that were broadleaves were probably not any bigger than that around. So they were smaller trees, but they were still broadleaves. So mostly, it was a mixed conifer deciduous forest, but dominated by conifers. That's the best story that we understand. Yeah. So pretty crazy, though.
Yeah.
Go up to the North Slope for forests, you know.
It was a great lecture. We really pulled it together.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, glad you came.
Well, I think the interesting thing is that dinosaurs were around 100 million years. Dinosaur period.
The total, I think, like 150 million years for dinosaurs.
We've
150.
been around for less than 6 million.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of sobering, isn't it?
It is. I mean, talk about Johnny come lately.
Yeah, really.
I figure I've been in trouble because I was born 2 days late with my God in this collection. Forget all about it.
Gives you some good perspective, right?
Anyway, very good.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
No, we're planning to get up to the exhibit, and I've heard good things about it, and not only from you. So.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So, and we're going to.
Here, is he close to zero?
It's very close. Like some people think it is Tyrannosaurus. Maybe a different species, but it's very close.
When you look at time, you stick your head in that mouth.
Nice big jaws.
And I don't think he hesitates to bite down and take it off.
And that's not full size.
He's kind of small.
That's a subadult. The full-sized skull would have been, about that much longer, but the cube in terms of mass larger. So pretty frightening, really.
You said that's a tooth from there.
This one, or this is Tyrannosaur tooth. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Pat.
You bet.
Great
No.
job, and really appreciate it. And everybody's got a lot out of it.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Thanks for coming.
Pretty sure you know the Earth is only 6,000 years
Oh,
old.
bug off.
Yeah.
Hecklers. There's always hecklers.
That's, but somebody's got a whole series of books out. I really named it after it. Just happened to run across it. Made a mistake. I was looking for a copy of Dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah.
I had a copy and I can't find it. I saw the same Tyler's guy coming out of the Oaks and
Yeah. Every so often they show up at our meetings too and try to make a scene.
well, it's just waste everybody's time.
Do you have things in here?
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
You know, you bet. Everything pretty much goes in there except this skull and those teeth. So yeah, feel free to just load it up. It'd be great. Actually, Bobby's here. If you got a few minutes, Bobby, I think we'll be good.
Oh, yeah. I need a break from writing.
Wait, it's field camp. You're not supposed to be writing.
Tell that to Ryan.
Yeah. So I think we're good. Otherwise, I didn't actually get a count.
Oh, there were.
We'll call.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you bet.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate having you.
Absolutely. All right.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Take care.
I'm glad I showed up for this table.
Yeah, I'm glad you were down here able to ride herd for a while because I didn't. Throng of folks. Nuts this week.
Is that going in here?
Yeah.
Okay. Rearrange things.
There's another foam layer here.
So, yeah. Field camp's going,
It's going all right?
going all right. We had to hide in one of the vans from a bear one day.
Oh yeah. Where was that?